Welcome to Brenau University's Career Coaching Series. Today we'll be discussing interviewing tips for healthcare professionals. My name is George Bagel. Our guest is Conrad Smith, CEO of Northeast Georgia Diagnostic Clinic. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. When we talk to students about interviewing, what we tell them is that once they get to the interview process, they many times won't be looked at based on their education and their experience, because they already know that from the resume. But what the top things that interviewers are looking for are attitude, enthusiasm, interest level, and communication skills. And I wonder if you could talk a little about that, what you think, if that's how you feel and what you found you look for when you have interviewed people in the past in the healthcare field.
Well, first of all, you're absolutely right. We already know that the person's probably qualified based on what we've seen from their resume and their written material that they submitted to us. So what I like to do when I interview is that you have to go down a long hallway to get to me. I like to greet you about halfway, and I want to see the candidate approach me. And what I'm looking for is visual clues, you know, how do they present themselves in that interview environment? How well dressed are they, and what's their posture? What's the eye contact? A good firm handshake is always important, regardless of gender, and eye contact and a bright smile is of the utmost importance, because we're in a business that we already know that your clinical skills are sound, but we're in a business that requires the ability to communicate with people across vast differences of economic situations, maybe even some language barriers and things like that. And how does one handle that in a situation that they do not necessarily have complete control over? It's also important because in a clinical setting, you become somewhat jaded because you're doing your job. It's something you do every day, and you seem to, there's a tendency to want to forget that the people you're doing it to may be the first, last, and only time that it ever happened to them. So your ability to continue to let them know what's going on, what to expect, and so forth is of the utmost importance. And you have to be able to communicate calmness, because some of these patients will be put in uncomfortable physical situations in order to complete an exam or a test.
Okay. It's interesting that you would say that, because in talking to various nursing graduates, they've said that what they've been told and what they've experienced is the fact that the bedside manner, there's more communication between the patient and them than there is between anybody else in their whole stay at the hospital. Would you agree with that?
Oh, absolutely. It is the physicians interact with patients is usually a fairly brief time period. The people who spend most of the time with the patient are the clinical support staff, from the registered nurses down to technicians, and even people who have to discuss financial situations with them, because after all, it's a business, and it's a pretty complex business in terms of how you're going to get how you pay for services. There's usually third parties involved, and no two situations are ever the same. So the ability to communicate relatively complex things in a way that is easily understood to patients and their families you can't stress that enough.
Besides the attitude and the enthusiasm and interest level, are there any particular other skill sets that you look for in a healthcare professional, practitioner, that we haven't talked about?
Well, I think one of the things that you have to have is empathy for the patient. And the other thing that we stress, and I think everybody should stress, is it's not a single individual that you have to concern yourself with. It's a family.
That's a good point.
That's with it too, and there's communication that has to go on not only with the patient, but to keep the family informed as to what's going on, to keep the family informed as to what the expectations are and what the next steps are, because you're going to have to include them potentially in future appointments and future scheduling and things like that, and you have to take that into consideration. But you can't stress enough that two equally skilled clinicians, what it comes down to is what's the human element? What's your ability to express and feel empathy, and what's your ability to communicate to those patients in a friendly and kind manner that they can appreciate?
Remember not too long ago when I was talking to some faculty from a medical school, and they said that they had just introduced a new class, and it was a bedside manner class. He said it was the first time that they'd introduced that sort of subject matter in medical school. And so as we were talking just now, I was wondering what would you suggest to somebody who's very scientifically minded, very clinically oriented, but maybe is not necessarily an outgoing person or might be a little shy? Is there anything you might suggest that they could do to increase their ability to do what you've just suggested?
Well, I think one of the things is that I find that believe it or not, humor can play an incredibly role in making people relax. And I mean that from both sides of the equation, both the person who's receiving the communication and the person who's giving it. So I would say don't be afraid to develop a well-rounded sense of humor about some of the things that go on. And then I think the other thing is that ability to look people in the eye, to let them to be able to communicate through body language and your voice that you care about the situation, that you understand the discomfort, and that you empathize with the patient and the patient's family's position as you're going through.
That's a hard thing to teach.
I think the other thing is don't ever be afraid to apologize. Keep in mind that in clinical settings so many times you're putting people in uncomfortable situations. You're probing, you're pinching, you're sticking people with needles or introducing catheters and things like that. It's not comfortable, and it can be disconcerting to the patient. And then at the end of it, you want to say, well, gee, from a patient point of view, how did you like that? And probably not very much, but I think is once again the strength of a clinician is we know they have the clinical skills, but how do they explain it to the patient, and can they put that patient at ease that demonstrates to them that I'm a competent person, we're going to get you through that, and we're going to do it with the least amount of discomfort possible for you.
Good idea. I think finally what I'd like to ask you is a lot of the students that we find, significant amount of students that we have in, say, the nursing program, the OT program, as well in the healthcare management program, are returning adults who are changing careers. So is there anything you might suggest to somebody who's in an interview situation who has maybe got 15 years experience in business but has never been in a medical situation before? Is there anything you could suggest to them?
There is. In fact, I can personalize that. A colleague of mine called me not long ago, and his son had recently been laid off by a major employer. And as he sat, and he was a well-educated young man, he said, and he was thinking about a healthcare career, would I take the time to meet with him? So we made an appointment. He came in, and by the way, I think he did everything correctly, because he showed up in my office even though this was something I was doing for his father, as a favor to his father, because I didn't know the young man, but he dressed like he was coming to an interview. And he sat down and he freely admitted, you know, I'm intrigued by the business that you're in, healthcare, and I'm in management, and that's something I would like to pursue. And so he took the time to feel out several other people that I referred him to, and helped him get in, so that he interviewed other people who were already in the business, and it enabled him to determine, first of all, that it was something he wanted to pursue. And now that I think about it, he's one of your healthcare management students.
Is that right? That's interesting. That's interesting. That says a lot, though, for informational interviewing and networking in general, because that's what we say. You know, you need to network, you need to do informational interviews, and people look at you sometimes and they go, "Well, what's that about?" And I think that one of the challenges for them is that they don't want to be someone who's going to take up too much of your time. Mm-hmm. And what we like to tell them is, you know what, most people that are professionals appreciate the fact that there's someone who is interested in what they do, if they're sincere about it. Mm-hmm. And so I think that says a lot about that.
But I think the thing is that, you know, most people the human nature is we like to help other people. Yeah. And
we like to talk about what we do.
We like to talk about what we do, and what I do is, you know, I'm pretty passionate about it. I've been doing it. I'm kind of different historically, because all my education is in healthcare management, and it's all I've ever done my entire career, working career. In that's probably a pretty unusual person, because a lot of people that I know, they're real estate agents who used to be nurses, or they're nurses, or they're real estate agents who became nurses, right, and things like that. I think as we get educated, when we're 18, 19, 20 years old, we have a view of what we think we want to do with our lives, and as we mature, we sometimes find out that our life didn't work out the way we thought it was going to, in terms of what our likes and dislikes were. And so don't be afraid to explore a different career. Sure, they're different, but if you have a sound educational base, you can learn a new career.
I agree. And I remember a study that was done not too long ago. It was a huge study. It was done across the United States, and they surveyed people that were over 40 who had a college degree, and they found out that over 50% of these folks were doing something at this point in their career that had absolutely nothing to do with what they graduated from college with. And I think when you're talking about like 18 to 20-year-olds, so often they feel that at that age they have to make this grandiose decision that this is what they're going to do for the rest of their lives, and say, no, this is what you want to do now. And see how it works out. You can always change.
You know, life is a grand series of experiences, and as you go through your life and have those experiences, you're going to find something that you have a passion for, and that's going to be the thing that draws you to it. I was a little different. I thought I had a passion for doing what I did, and I did it, and I've been doing it ever since. But I would think that to some degree I'm unique in that.
Well, that's great. Is there anything else that you can think of offhand that you'd like to offer these folks?
I know that you've stressed this before, but I can't stress it enough, and that is the resume and the letter of introduction that you submit for positions that you're in. I can't stress it enough that you're only going to get about 10 seconds of somebody's eye, and that 10 seconds is going to determine which pile your resume ends up in. Especially with all of the media that's available today,
right?
With computer word processing, things like that, don't use a generic resume and a generic letter for every job. Do a little research. Get online, Google, Bing, whatever you care to use. Do some research about the company and try to include things that you believe that company would care about in how you construct your resume, but more importantly, how you construct the letter of introduction that comes along with it.
I agree, totally. Thank you. We really appreciate the time.
George. Appreciate it.